Hello there, and welcome to Sleep Science Chronicles. Tonight we are going to slip beneath the surface of the familiar world, past everything you can see with your eyes, and into the hidden realms that exist all around us. These are the secret ecosystems, the quiet kingdoms, the living worlds that hum with activity just out of sight. They are beneath your feet, inside fallen logs, within the roots of ancient trees, and deep below the waves. They have been here far longer than we have, and they continue their work whether we notice them or not. Some of these worlds are small enough to fit in your hand: a tide pool on a rocky shore, a patch of moss on a forest floor, a single clump of soil no bigger than your fist. Others stretch across entire continents, connecting forests through underground networks we are only beginning to understand. And still others exist in places so remote, so deep, so far from sunlight, that they seem more like alien planets than parts of our own Earth. What unites them all is this: they are hidden. Not because they are rare or far away, but because we so often walk past them without looking. We step on soil and call it dirt. We see a mushroom and think it is the whole organism, not knowing that the real body stretches unseen beneath us for miles. We watch the ocean's surface glitter in the sun and forget that below it lies a darkness deeper than any canyon, filled with creatures that make their own light. Tonight, we are going to look gently, slowly. We are going to wander through these hidden worlds, one quiet discovery at a time. There is no rush. There is nowhere else you need to be. If your eyes grow heavy, you can let them close. If your thoughts begin to drift, you can let them go. The facts will still be here, soft and steady, like stones in a stream. You can rest against them or let them carry you somewhere deeper. We will begin in the most overlooked place of all, the ground beneath your feet, and discover that what we call soil is not dead matter, but a living world more densely populated than any city. We will follow the threads of fungi as they weave through the darkness, connecting trees in a silent conversation that has been going on for millions of years. We will trace the roots of plants as they reach downward into the earth, sensing, searching, and signaling to one another in chemical languages we are only now learning to read. And we will settle onto the forest floor, where fallen leaves become the foundation of new life, and small creatures work in endless cycles of transformation. From there, our journey will take us higher into the treetops, then deeper into caves where light has never reached, and finally beneath the ocean to the strangest ecosystems on the planet. But all of that will unfold in its own time. For now, we begin where we stand. We begin with the world beneath. If you enjoy these peaceful explorations, feel free to like and subscribe below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is rest. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breathing slow, and let us begin. There is a world beneath your feet that you have never seen. It is alive. It is vast, and it is more densely populated than any place on the surface of the earth. We call it soil, but that word does not capture what it truly is. Soil is not merely ground. It is not the dead stuff we scrape off our shoes. It is a living system, a dark and intricate web of organisms, minerals, water, air, and organic matter, all woven together into something that makes life on land possible. Without it, there would be no forests, no grasslands, no fields of grain, no flowers, no us. The soil is where death becomes life again, where the fallen are taken apart and reassembled into something new. It is the quiet engine beneath everything, A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains more living organisms than there are human beings on the entire planet. Imagine that for a moment. In that small pinch of earth, held between your fingers, there are billions of bacteria, millions of fungi, thousands of protozoa, and hundreds of nematodes, insects, and other tiny creatures. Each one is doing something: eating, excreting, dying, reproducing, breaking down dead matter, building new structures, releasing nutrients, capturing carbon. The activity never stops. It has been going on for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans existed, and it will continue long after we are gone. The soil does not sleep. Even when the surface world falls quiet, the underground hums with life. What we call soil took an almost incomprehensible amount of time to form. The top 6 inches of earth beneath a forest or prairie, the rich dark layer where most roots grow and most life thrives, may have taken several thousand years to develop. Rock had to be broken down by wind and water. Lichens had to dissolve stone with their acids. Plants had to grow and die and decay. Animals had to burrow and chew and defecate. Fungi had to digest the dead and release their nutrients. Generation after generation of living things had to cycle through existence, each one adding a thin layer to the accumulating matrix. The soil you walk on is not just ground. It is time. It is the compressed history of countless lives. Most of us never think about the creatures that live in soil, yet they are among the most important animals on Earth. Earthworms, in particular, are engineers of the underground world. In a single acre of healthy land, earthworms can process many tons of soil each year. They swallow earth as they tunnel, digest the organic material within it, and excrete castings that are rich in nutrients and beneficial microbes. Their burrows create channels that allow air and water to penetrate deep into the ground, reaching the roots of plants that would otherwise suffocate or starve. When it rains, the tunnels help water soak in rather than run off. When the soil dries, the tunnels allow oxygen to circulate. Without earthworms, the ground would become compacted, lifeless, and sterile. Charles Darwin spent years studying these humble creatures and concluded that few animals have played a more important role in the history of the world. Beneath the surface, bacteria communicate in ways that seem almost intentional. They release chemical signals into the soil, and other bacteria respond. Some signals attract, some repel, some warn of danger, some invite cooperation. Entire communities of microbes coordinate their behavior based on these chemical conversations, working together to break down complex organic matter, defend against invaders, or share resources in times of scarcity. This communication happens without brains, without nervous systems, without anything we would recognize as awareness, and yet the signals are real. The responses are real. The soil is full of conversations we cannot hear, languages we are only beginning to decode. Beneath every quiet meadow, a hidden dialogue is unfolding in the dark. The smell of rain on dry earth has a name. It is called petrichor, and it comes from the soil itself. When rain falls after a dry spell, it disturbs the ground and releases oils produced by certain soil bacteria. These bacteria, called actinomycetes, are among the most abundant microbes in healthy earth. As they break down organic matter, they release a compound called geosmin, which our noses are extraordinarily sensitive to. We can detect it at concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion. That scent, which so many people find calming and beautiful, Is the smell of soil bacteria doing their ancient work? It is a reminder, if we pause to notice, that the ground beneath us is alive and breathing. Healthy soil breathes in a way that mirrors our own. It inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. The organisms within it, from bacteria to fungi to tiny invertebrates, consume oxygen as they metabolize organic matter, and they release carbon dioxide as a byproduct. This respiration is constant. It fluctuates with temperature and moisture, increasing when the soil is warm and damp, slowing when it is cold or dry. But it never truly stops. The earth exhales day and night, summer and winter, beneath forests and fields and city parks. If you could hear it, the ground would sound like something breathing in its sleep. Soil is not a single thing. It is a matrix, a blend of 4 essential components held in delicate balance. There are minerals, tiny particles of rock broken down over eons. There is organic matter, the decayed remains of plants and animals and microbes. There is water clinging to particles and filling the spaces between them. And there is air, occupying the pockets and channels that allow roots and organisms to survive. If any of these components is missing or out of balance, the soil becomes inhospitable. Too much water and organisms drown. Too little and they desiccate. Too few minerals and plants cannot grow. Too little organic matter and the whole system collapses. The health of the soil depends on the balance of things we cannot see. The ground beneath a forest creates its own water cycle. When rain falls on trees, much of it is intercepted by leaves and branches, then drips slowly down to the soil below. The organic layer on the forest floor acts like a sponge, absorbing water and releasing it gradually into the earth. Roots pull water up from deep underground and release some of it through their leaves in a process called transpiration. This water rises into the atmosphere, forms clouds, and falls again as rain. A healthy forest can recycle much of its own rainfall, creating a humid microclimate that sustains the ecosystem. When forests are cut down, this cycle breaks. The soil dries, the rains change, and the land becomes something else entirely. Without the ecosystems living in soil, terrestrial life as we know it would collapse. Plants depend on soil organisms to break down dead matter and release nutrients in forms their roots can absorb. Without decomposers, fallen leaves and dead animals would pile up endlessly, locking away the nitrogen and phosphorus and carbon that living things need. Without burrowing creatures, the ground would become impenetrable to roots and water. Without the microbial communities that cycle nutrients and suppress disease, plants would sicken and fail. The green world above is entirely dependent on the dark world below. Every forest, every meadow, every garden is a partnership between what we see and what we do not. Below the surface of almost every forest, meadow, and field on Earth, a second world exists, woven from threads finer than human hair. This is the kingdom of fungi, and it is neither plant nor animal. Fungi belong to their own domain of life, as different from plants as animals are. They do not photosynthesize. They do not hunt or graze. Instead, they absorb nutrients from their surroundings, breaking down dead matter or forming partnerships with the living. Their bodies are made of mycelium, a vast network of branching filaments that spread through the soil like a living web. What we call a mushroom is only the fruiting body, the reproductive structure that rises briefly into the light. The true organism lies hidden beneath, vast and patient, and very old. Over 90% of all land plants form partnerships with underground fungi. These partnerships are called mycorrhizal associations, and they are among the most important relationships in nature. The fungi wrap around or penetrate the roots of plants, extending their reach far beyond what roots alone could achieve. In exchange for sugars that the plant produces through photosynthesis, the fungi deliver water and nutrients drawn from the surrounding soil. Neither partner could thrive as well alone. The plant gains access to a larger world. The fungus gains access to energy it cannot produce itself. This exchange has been happening for over 400 million years, since the first plants colonized the land. It is one of the oldest partnerships on Earth. Beneath the forests of the world, trees are connected to one another through fungal networks that scientists have come to call the Wood Wide Web. A single mycelial network can link dozens or even hundreds of trees, allowing them to share resources and information. When one tree has more sugar than it needs, it can send the excess through the fungal threads to a neighbor that is struggling. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can release chemical signals that travel through the network and warn other trees to mount their defenses. The forest, it turns out, is not a collection of isolated individuals competing for light. It is a community, quietly cooperating beneath the surface in ways we never suspected. Mother trees, the largest and oldest trees in a forest, play a special role in these underground networks. Research has shown that they can recognize their own offspring among the seedlings growing nearby, and they preferentially send them resources through the fungal connections. A struggling seedling that shares genes with a mother tree receives more sugar, more nutrients, more support than a stranger would. This is not competition. This is care. The forest in some sense is raising its young, nurturing the next generation through an underground system of silent generosity. When a mother tree dies, the network it supported can weaken or fragment, leaving younger trees more vulnerable. A single fungal network can span extraordinary distances. In the forests of the Pacific Northwest, mycorrhizal networks have been found connecting trees across many acres. The honey fungus of the Blue Mountains in Oregon holds the record for the largest known organism on Earth. A single genetic individual spread across nearly 2,400 acres and estimated to be thousands of years old. This creature, if we can call it that, is not a single mushroom or a single thread, but a continuous network of mycelium woven through the forest floor, quietly digesting wood and connecting trees in a web so vast it defies comprehension. We walk above it without knowing. It has been there longer than any human civilization. Mycelium does not have a brain, but it behaves in ways that seem almost intelligent. In laboratory experiments, fungal networks have been shown to solve mazes, finding the shortest path to food sources even when multiple routes are available. They can sense nutrients at a distance and grow toward them. They can redistribute resources within their network, sending extra food to growing tips or damaged areas. They can remember, in some chemical sense, where resources have been found before and prioritize exploration in those directions. This is not thought as we understand it. There is no consciousness, no intention, but there is some capacity for complex behavior that emerges from the interactions of countless simple threads responding to their environment. Fungi are the great recyclers of the natural world. Without them, dead matter would accumulate endlessly, locking away the nutrients that living things need. Fallen trees would lie unrotting. Dead leaves would pile higher each year. The carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus bound up in dead tissue would be trapped forever. But fungi break it all down. Their enzymes dissolve the tough molecules that nothing else can digest, cellulose and lignin and chitin, and release the nutrients back into the soil where roots can absorb them. Every forest depends on this process, every meadow, every ecosystem where things grow and die and grow again. Without fungi, the cycle of life would grind to a halt. Some fungi have been quietly at work for longer than we can easily imagine. There are mycelial networks in old-growth forests that have been growing for thousands of years, slowly expanding, slowly digesting, slowly connecting generation after generation of trees. These ancient organisms have survived ice ages and droughts, fires and floods. They have outlasted entire species of trees and animals. They carry within their cells a chemical memory of the forest's history, a record of what has grown and died and grown again in that patch of earth. When we walk through an old forest, we walk above living things that were already ancient when the pyramids were built. Fungi were among the first organisms to colonize the land. Before there were forests, before there were trees, before there were even roots in the modern sense, fungi were already spreading across the bare rock of the early continents. They formed partnerships with the first land plants, helping them extract nutrients from the thin and lifeless soil. Without fungi, plants might never have been able to leave the water. The green world we know, the forests and grasslands and flowering meadows, all of it rests on a foundation built by fungi hundreds of millions of years ago. They made the land habitable, and they have been holding it together ever since. When we see a mushroom rising from the forest floor, we are seeing only a small fraction of the organism that produced it. Beneath that single fruiting body lies a network of mycelium that may spread for yards or even miles in every direction. The mushroom exists for one purpose only: to release spores into the air and send them drifting to new ground where new networks can begin. Once the spores have been released, the mushroom decays and vanishes, but the mycelium remains, hidden in the soil, continuing its slow and patient work. The mushroom was only a moment in the life of something much larger and much older. Plants are not passive. Beneath the surface of the soil, their roots are reaching, searching, sensing, and responding to a world of chemical signals we cannot perceive. A root tip does not simply grow downward. It navigates. It can sense gravity and grow toward it. It can sense moisture and grow toward it. It can sense nutrients and grow toward them. It can sense obstacles and grow around them. This is not thought. There is no brain in a root, but there is sensitivity, responsiveness, a capacity for complex behavior that emerges from the biochemistry of living cells responding to their environment. The root is exploring, making decisions in some fundamental sense, even if it does not know that it is doing so. Most plants have far more mass below the ground than above it. A tree that rises 60 feet into the air may have roots that extend just as far downward and spread even wider. A prairie grass with blades only a foot tall may have roots that reach 10 feet or more into the earth. This hidden half of the plant is not simply an anchor. It is a network for gathering water and nutrients, a storage organ for reserves of sugar, a communication system for exchanging signals with neighbors and symbionts. When we see a plant, we are seeing only half of it. The other half is down there in the dark, feeling its way through a world we cannot see. Roots communicate with one another through the soil. They release chemicals from their tips that diffuse through the earth and can be detected by the roots of other plants nearby. Some of these signals are friendly, attracting beneficial microbes or signaling the presence of nutrients. Others are hostile, suppressing the growth of competitors or warning of danger. Still others are recognition signals, allowing plants to distinguish between the roots of siblings, strangers, and themselves. A plant whose roots encounter its own roots in the soil responds differently than when it encounters the roots of another individual. The underground is full of chemical conversations, negotiations for space and resources, conducted in a language of molecules. Deep roots can access water that surface roots cannot reach. In times of drought, this becomes critical. Some trees can send roots dozens of feet into the earth, tapping into groundwater reserves that persist even when the surface soil is dry. At night, when the air is cool and transpiration slows, these trees pull water up through their deep roots and release some of it into the upper layers of soil. This process, called hydraulic lift, benefits not only the tree that does it, but also the neighboring plants whose shallow roots can now access the lifted water. In this way, deep-rooted trees act as pumps, redistributing moisture through the soil and buffering the whole community against drought. The tips of roots contain clusters of cells that behave in surprisingly complex ways. Some researchers have compared them to the neurons in an animal's brain, not because they are identical, but because they integrate multiple signals and produce coordinated responses. A root tip senses gravity, moisture, nutrients, touch, light, and chemical gradients all at once. It processes this information and adjusts its growth accordingly. If it encounters a rock, it grows around it. If it senses a pocket of nutrient-rich soil, it branches into it. If it detects the chemical signature of a pathogen, it may retreat or release defensive compounds. All of this happens without any central control, without any conscious awareness. And yet, the behavior is undeniably sophisticated. Plants can distinguish between themselves and others. When the roots of a plant encounter its own roots elsewhere in the soil, they tend to avoid competing with them. But when they encounter the roots of a different individual, even of the same species, they may compete more aggressively, branching and spreading to capture as much territory as possible. This recognition is chemical. Plants release signature compounds from their roots that identify them, and roots can detect these signatures and respond appropriately. In some sense, a plant knows where its own body ends and where another's begins. The underground is full of boundaries being drawn and redrawn in a slow-motion negotiation for space. Roots actively recruit helpful microbes from the surrounding soil. They release sugars and amino acids and other compounds into the earth, creating a zone of enrichment around themselves called the rhizosphere. This zone attracts bacteria and fungi that feed on the exudates and, in return, provide services to the plant. Some of these microbes fix nitrogen from the air, converting it into forms the plant can use. Others solubilize minerals locked in rock particles, making them available for uptake. Still others produce hormones that stimulate root growth or antibiotics that suppress disease. The plant is farming, in a sense, cultivating a community of helpers in the darkness around its roots. Root systems can persist in the earth for far longer than we might expect. In the fossil record, scientists have found evidence of root networks more than 400 million years old, preserved in ancient rocks that once lay beneath forests long since vanished. These early roots were simpler than modern ones. but they performed the same essential functions: anchoring plants, absorbing water, exchanging signals with fungi. The partnership between roots and earth is one of the oldest on land. It has been tested by every climate shift, every extinction event, every transformation the planet has endured, and it is still here, still working, still holding the living world in place. In many forests, the roots of different trees grow so close together that they eventually fuse. This happens most often among trees of the same species, but it can occur between different species as well. Once fused, the root systems become a single connected network, allowing water and nutrients to flow between individuals. A tree that has been cut down or damaged may survive for years or even decades, sustained by the roots of its neighbors. The forest below the surface is not a collection of separate trees, but a tangled web of shared infrastructure. What happens to one can ripple through the others in ways we are only beginning to understand. The forest floor is one of the richest habitats on Earth, though it rarely catches our attention. It is a thin layer, sometimes only a few inches deep, made of fallen leaves, rotting wood, animal droppings, and the bodies of countless small creatures in various stages of decay. This layer is the interface between the living and the dead, the place where nutrients cycle back into the ecosystem. Everything that falls from the canopy above ends up here. Everything that dies in the forest ends up here, and from here, it all becomes something else. The forest floor is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the next one. A single square meter of forest floor can contain thousands of invertebrates. There are mites too small to see with the naked eye, feeding on fungi and bacteria. There are springtails that jump like tiny fleas when disturbed, grazing on decaying matter. There are beetles burrowing through rotting wood. There are centipedes hunting smaller creatures. There are millipedes slowly chewing fallen leaves into fragments. There are earthworms pulling debris down into the soil. There are ants tending underground gardens. There are nematodes threading through the moisture between particles. Every handful of leaf litter is a world in miniature, densely populated and constantly busy. The decomposers of the forest floor recycle nutrients faster and more efficiently than any human system. What falls from the trees in autumn, thousands of pounds of leaves per acre, is broken down and returned to the soil within a year or two in most temperate forests, even faster in tropical ones. This recycling is not automatic. It requires the coordinated effort of countless organisms, each doing its part. Fungi soften the tough cell walls of leaves. Bacteria dissolve the proteins and sugars. Invertebrates shred the debris into smaller pieces, increasing the surface area for microbes to work on. Without this army of decomposers, the nutrients locked in dead matter would take far longer to return to circulation. In temperate forests, salamanders are often the most abundant vertebrates on the forest floor. In some regions, the total mass of salamanders exceeds the total mass of all the birds and mammals combined. These small secretive creatures spend most of their lives under logs and rocks in leaf litter, emerging at night to hunt for invertebrates. They breathe through their skin and cannot survive in dry conditions, so they stay close to the moist darkness of the forest floor. Most people never see them, but they are there in astonishing numbers, quietly going about their lives in a world just beneath our notice. Fallen logs become nurse logs, structures that support entire communities of new life. When a large tree falls in the forest, It does not simply rot and vanish, it becomes a habitat. Mosses and lichens colonize its surface. Fungi penetrate its wood. Insects bore tunnels through its bark. Small mammals nest inside its hollows. Seeds land on its rotting surface and send roots down into the decaying wood, drawing nutrients from the dead tree as they grow into new ones. In some forests, the majority of new trees germinate not in the soil but on the bodies of fallen giants. The dead become the foundation for the living. The forest floor has its own microclimate, distinct from the air above. It is cooler in summer and warmer in winter. It is more humid, more sheltered, more stable. The layer of leaves and debris insulates the soil beneath, buffering it from temperature extremes. This stability matters enormously to the creatures that live there. Many of them cannot tolerate the heat and dryness of the open air. They depend on the protective blanket of the forest floor to survive. When leaf litter is removed or compacted, the microclimate changes and the community that depends on it can disappear. Millipedes have been walking the earth for over 400 million years, making them among the oldest land animals still alive. They are not insects, but myriapods, a distinct lineage that evolved separately. Their bodies are segmented with 2 pairs of legs per segment, and they move in slow waves of coordinated motion. Most millipedes are detritivores, feeding on dead plant material and breaking it into smaller pieces. They are humble creatures, unspectacular and often ignored. But they have been doing the same essential work since before the dinosaurs, chewing through fallen leaves and turning them back into soil. The leaf litter of the forest floor provides insulation that protects both roots and small creatures from winter cold. Beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves, the soil temperature rarely drops below freezing, even when the air above is bitterly cold. This allows earthworms and insects and other invertebrates to remain active deep in the ground, continuing their work through the winter months. It protects the roots of perennial plants from frost damage. It creates refuges where small mammals can survive the coldest nights. The leaves that seem so dead and useless are, in fact, a blanket keeping the ecosystem alive. Many creatures of the forest floor are nocturnal, emerging only after darkness falls. During the day, they shelter beneath logs and rocks and leaf litter, waiting for the safety of night. When the sun sets and the air cools and the humidity rises, they come out. Salamanders crawl from their hiding places to hunt. Slugs and snails glide across the damp leaves. Beetles and centipedes patrol the debris. Moths flutter low among the ferns. The forest floor that seems so still and quiet during the day comes alive when we are not watching. Seeds can lie dormant in the forest floor for astonishing lengths of time, waiting for the right conditions to germinate. Some seeds remain viable for decades, buried in the soil beneath layers of leaf litter. They wait for a gap to open in the canopy above, for the light and warmth that signal opportunity. When it comes, they spring to life, racing to grow before the gap closes again. This seed bank is a reservoir of potential, a hidden store of future forests waiting beneath the present one. A disturbance that clears the canopy, a fire or a windstorm or the fall of a great tree, can awaken seeds that have been sleeping for longer than a human lifetime. The distinctive scent of a forest comes largely from the decomposition happening on its floor. It is a blend of many compounds released by fungi and bacteria as they break down organic matter. There are earthy notes from geosmin and musty notes from fungal metabolites and green notes from chlorophyll breaking down and sweet notes from fermenting sugars. This scent is the smell of life cycling through death and back again. It is the smell of nutrients being released and captured and built into new tissue. When we breathe deeply in a forest and feel a sense of peace, we are inhaling the breath of decomposers working in the darkness below. The forest floor is constantly receiving new material from above. Leaves fall, branches snap and drop, bark peels away from trunks, flowers and seeds and fruits rain down, insects fall from the canopy, birds drop feathers and droppings. Each addition becomes part of the layer, fuel for the decomposers, substrate for new growth. The forest floor is not static. It is a slow-motion river of organic matter, constantly flowing from the heights of the canopy down into the depths of the soil. We stand on the surface of this river and rarely notice it moving. Certain plants have adapted to thrive in the deep shade of the forest floor, where only a small fraction of sunlight penetrates. These understory plants have evolved leaves that are especially efficient at capturing dim light. Some have dark green pigments packed densely together. Others have leaves shaped to avoid self-shading. Still others have reflective surfaces that bounce light between layers of cells, increasing absorption. Life on the forest floor means making the most of what little energy reaches the ground. These plants have found ways to survive on scraps of light that canopy trees would consider too dim to notice. Fungi on the forest floor form partnerships not only with trees, but also with the small plants that grow in the understory. Orchids, for example, are often heavily dependent on fungal partners. Some orchid seeds are so tiny that they contain no stored nutrients at all. They cannot germinate without the help of fungi that penetrate the seed coat and provide the sugars the seedling needs to grow. This dependence continues throughout the orchid's life. Even as adults, many forest orchids rely on their fungal partners for a portion of their nutrition. The partnership is ancient and intimate, a bond that has shaped the evolution of both organisms. The forest floor is a buffer against extreme weather. When heavy rains fall on a forest, the canopy intercepts much of the water and slows its descent. What reaches the ground is absorbed by the spongy layer of leaf litter and organic matter soaking into the soil rather than running off across the surface. This prevents erosion, reduces flooding, and recharges groundwater. In a forest, the floor acts as a giant sponge, holding water and releasing it slowly over time. When forests are cleared, this buffering capacity is lost, and the consequences can be seen in eroded hillsides and swollen rivers downstream. There is a rhythm to life on the forest floor that follows the seasons. In spring, when the trees above have not yet fully leafed out, sunlight reaches the ground in abundance, and a wave of wildflowers blooms in the temporary brightness. As the canopy fills in, the forest floor grows dim again, and the flowers fade. In autumn, leaves fall in great drifts, smothering some plants and providing shelter for others. In winter, activity slows but does not stop. Beneath the insulating layer of snow and leaves, decomposition continues, and the slow work of recycling goes on. The forest floor has its own calendar, its own cycles, its own sense of time. Certain creatures spend their entire lives within the leaf litter layer, never venturing into the open air above or the deep soil below. These are specialists, adapted to the particular conditions of their narrow world. The moisture, the temperature, the chemistry, the texture of their environment are all specific to this layer. They have evolved bodies and behaviors suited to navigating the maze of fallen leaves, and decomposing debris. If the leaf litter is disturbed or removed, they have nowhere else to go. Their world is thin and fragile, a few inches of habitat that means everything to those who depend on it. The forest floor is full of predators and prey locked in ancient cycles of pursuit and escape. Ground beetles hunt smaller invertebrates through the leaf litter. Centipedes inject venom into their victims with modified legs. Spiders stretch webs between stems and wait for vibrations. Shrews dash through tunnels, their metabolism so fast they must eat constantly or starve. The floor that seems so peaceful is, in fact, a landscape of constant danger for the small creatures that inhabit it. Every moment is a negotiation between the need to find food and the need to avoid becoming food. In tropical rainforests, the decomposition cycle runs so fast that the forest floor is often surprisingly bare. Unlike temperate forests where leaves accumulate in thick layers, tropical forest floors are almost continuously swept clean by the armies of decomposers working in the warm, wet conditions. Nutrients released from fallen debris are absorbed almost immediately by the dense mat of roots that covers the ground. Very little organic matter builds up. The fertility of the rainforest is not in the soil, but in the living biomass above and the rapid cycling between the two. Cut the forest down, and the thin soil quickly loses its richness. Ants are among the most influential creatures on the forest floor. In many ecosystems, they move more soil than earthworms. They carry seeds into their nests where some germinate in the nutrient-rich chambers. They tend underground gardens of fungi that they feed and harvest. They protect certain plants from herbivores in exchange for food and shelter. They scavenge dead insects and carry them back to their colonies, accelerating decomposition. A forest floor without ants would function very differently. These tiny insects, often unnoticed, are architects of the underground world. The forest floor is where the canopy's debris meets the soil's hunger, a zone of transformation where all the matter that cycles through the ecosystem must eventually pass. It is both a graveyard and a nursery. It is where the old becomes new, where the fallen are dismantled, where energy changes form. It does not look like much, a layer of brown leaves and twigs, a scattering of rotting wood, a few mushrooms pushing up through the debris. But beneath that humble surface, one of the great engines of the living world is running, as it has run for hundreds of millions of years, turning death into life, one small creature, one patient fungus, one silent chemical exchange at a time. Perhaps you have walked through a forest and felt the ground soft beneath your feet. Perhaps you have noticed the smell of earth and decay and growing things, all mingled together into something that felt like life itself. That feeling was not an illusion. You were walking on a world as complex and busy and ancient as any on the surface, a world that asks nothing of you and gives everything to the life above. The hidden kingdoms beneath your feet are always there, whether you notice them or not. They are there now as you rest, continuing their slow and patient work while the surface world sleeps. And so we have wandered through the first of the hidden worlds, the realm that lies just beneath the surface of everything we see. We have met the creatures that live in soil and the fungi that weave through it. We have traced the roots of plants as they reach into the darkness and listened to the silent conversations they carry on below. We have settled onto the forest floor and watched the slow transformation of the fallen into the foundation of new life. But this is only the beginning. Beyond the soil and the roots and the leaf litter, other hidden worlds await. In the chapters to come, we will rise into the canopy and then descend into caves where light has never reached. We will slip beneath the surface of the ocean and explore ecosystems stranger than any science fiction. We will find life in boiling water and crushing pressure and utter darkness. For now, though, let these quieter worlds settle around you like fallen leaves. Let the image of mycelium spreading through the soil become a soft web in your thoughts. Let the slow breath of the earth, inhaling oxygen, exhaling carbon, match the rhythm of your own breathing. The hidden worlds are not far away. They are right here, beneath you, around you, part of the same living system that includes your own body and your own breath. Rest now if you are ready. The journey continues whenever you wish to follow it further. The hidden worlds will still be there, patient and ancient, and endlessly at work whenever you return. Now we rise, up from the soil and the roots and the soft decay of the forest floor, up through the understory where ferns unfurl in the dim green light, up past the middle layers where branches interweave and birds flit through the shadows, up and up until we reach a world that floats above the earth like a separate continent. This is the rainforest canopy, and it is one of the most hidden worlds of all, not because it is underground or underwater, but because it is simply too high for us to reach. For most of human history, the canopy remained a mystery, a green ceiling glimpsed from below but never truly explored. Only in recent decades have scientists found ways to climb into this realm and discover what lives there. What they found astonished them. The rainforest canopy has been called the eighth continent of the world, a reference to how much undiscovered life it contains. Biologists estimate that more than half of all species living in a rainforest never descend to the ground. They are born in the canopy, live their entire lives in the canopy, and die in the canopy, hundreds of feet above the forest floor. For these creatures, the ground is as foreign and inaccessible as the deep ocean would be to us. Their world is made of branches and leaves and vines and the empty air between them. They have no need for soil. They have no knowledge of roots. Their universe is suspended in the sky. The trees that form the canopy can reach staggering heights. In tropical rainforests, the tallest canopy trees often exceed 150 or even 200 feet, their crowns spreading wide to capture as much sunlight as possible. Below them, the forest floor receives only a tiny fraction of the light that falls on the canopy above. Some measurements suggest that as little as 1 or 2% of sunlight penetrates to the ground. The canopy is a light trap, a vast solar collector that absorbs almost everything and leaves the understory in perpetual twilight. To live below is to live in shadow. To live above is to live in a world of brilliant, blazing green. Within the canopy, entire gardens grow without ever touching the earth. These are the epiphytes, plants that make their homes on the branches and trunks of trees. Orchids, ferns, bromeliads, mosses, and lichens festoon the canopy trees, clinging to bark and wedging into crevices. They are not parasites. They do not steal nutrients from their hosts. Instead, they draw moisture from the humid air and nutrients from the dust and debris that accumulates around them. Some epiphytes have specialized structures for capturing rainwater. Others have roots that dangle in the air, absorbing moisture directly from the mist. They have freed themselves from the ground entirely. Some canopy plants complete their entire life cycle without any contact with the soil below. They germinate on a branch, grow on that branch, flower and fruit on that branch, and eventually die and decompose on that branch, their nutrients absorbed by other epiphytes nearby. Generations of these plants live and die in the treetops, their remains building up into a kind of canopy soil, a dark organic layer that accumulates in the crooks and hollows of branches. This suspended soil hosts its own community of invertebrates and microbes, a miniature version of the forest floor, hovering 100 feet above the real one. In the angles where branches meet trunks, pockets of debris accumulate over years and decades. Fallen leaves, dead insects, bird droppings, and decaying plant matter collect in these natural bowls, slowly composting into rich organic material. Within these pockets, entire ecosystems develop. Earthworms have been found living in canopy soil. Beetle larvae tunnel through it. Fungi break it down. Seeds germinate in it, sending roots into the rotting mass and shoots up toward the light. These suspended gardens are islands of fertility in the sky, each one a tiny world unto itself, isolated from the ground but teeming with life. Poison dart frogs, among the most brilliantly colored animals on Earth, raise their young in the canopy, using the water that collects in bromeliad leaves. A female frog lays her eggs on the forest floor or on a low branch. When the tadpoles hatch, she carries them on her back, one by one, climbing high into the canopy to find a bromeliad with a pool of water cupped in its central leaves. She deposits each tadpole in a separate pool, giving it the best chance of survival. Then she returns, sometimes for weeks, to lay unfertilized eggs in the water as food for her growing young. The entire nursery exists in pools no bigger than a teacup, suspended in plants that cling to branches far above the ground. Sloths spend nearly their entire lives in the canopy, descending to the forest floor only about once a week. These slow-moving mammals are so adapted to life in the trees that their fur grows in the opposite direction from most animals, allowing rain to run off when they hang upside down. Algae grows in their fur, giving them a greenish tinge that helps camouflage them among the leaves. Their metabolism is extraordinarily slow, and they sleep up to 20 hours a day, clinging to branches with their powerful curved claws. When they do come down to the ground, they are awkward and vulnerable, barely able to walk. The canopy is their true home. The ground is a dangerous foreign country they visit only when necessary. The branches of canopy trees do not exist in isolation. Over time, they grow toward one another, intertwining and grafting until they form continuous pathways through the treetops. These natural bridges allow animals to travel long distances without ever descending to the ground. Monkeys race along them. Squirrels leap between them. Snakes slither across them. Even some frogs and lizards use these aerial highways to move through the forest. The canopy, seen from above, is not a collection of separate trees, but a connected network, a three-dimensional maze of branches and vines that links the forest into a single navigable space. Scientists who study the canopy believe that millions of insect species living there have never been described or named. The diversity is so vast and the habitat so difficult to access that most canopy invertebrates remain unknown to science. Expeditions that fog canopy trees with insecticide and collect what falls have discovered astonishing numbers of beetles, ants, wasps, flies, and other insects, many of them new to science. Some researchers estimate that the majority of all insect species on Earth may live primarily or exclusively in tropical forest canopies. We have barely begun to catalog what is there. The canopy plays a crucial role in regulating rainfall patterns far beyond the forest itself. Trees pull water from the soil through their roots and release it through their leaves in a process called transpiration. In a large rainforest, this released moisture rises into the atmosphere, forms clouds, and falls again as rain, sometimes hundreds of miles away. The Amazon rainforest generates so much atmospheric moisture that it influences weather patterns across South America and beyond. The canopy is not just a habitat. It is a water pump, a climate engine, a system that shapes the conditions for life across entire continents. Some canopy trees bloom only at night, their flowers opening after dark to attract pollinators that are active when the sun goes down. Bats are among the most important of these nighttime visitors. They hover before flowers, extending long tongues to reach the nectar inside, and in doing so, they transfer pollen from one tree to another. Many canopy trees depend entirely on bats for reproduction. Without these nocturnal pollinators, the trees could not produce seeds, and without the trees, the bats would lose a crucial food source. The relationship has been refined over millions of years, a partnership that unfolds in darkness while the rest of the forest sleeps. Harpy eagles, among the largest and most powerful raptors in the world, hunt in the canopy and above it. Their prey includes monkeys and sloths, animals that most predators cannot reach, with wingspans exceeding 6 feet and talons as large as a grizzly bear's claws. Harpy eagles are apex predators of the treetops. They build enormous nests in the crowns of the tallest trees and return to them year after year. From their high perches, they watch the canopy below, waiting for movement among the branches. When they strike, they can snatch a full-grown monkey from a branch and carry it away. In the canopy, even the hunters are hidden from the ground. The temperature difference between the canopy and the forest floor can be dramatic. On a sunny day, the canopy may be 20 or even 30 degrees warmer than the shaded ground below. The humidity is often lower in the canopy as well, since the dense vegetation below traps moisture and keeps the air saturated. Creatures that live in the canopy must tolerate these harsher conditions. The blazing sun, the drying wind, the temperature swings between day and night. The canopy is not a gentle environment. It is an extreme one, and only specialists can thrive there. Rising above the main canopy, a few giant trees push even higher, breaking through the green ceiling to stand alone against the sky. These are the emergent trees, the tallest individuals in the forest, and they form a world of their own above the world of the canopy. Their crowns are exposed to full sun and full wind, conditions that would stress most trees, but that these giants have evolved to withstand. They tower over their neighbors like islands in a sea of green, visible from miles away, landmarks in a landscape where everything else blends together. Emergent trees can reach 250 feet or more, their trunks rising straight and branchless for 100 feet before spreading into broad crowns. They have had to evolve special adaptations to survive at these heights. Their wood is dense and strong to resist the forces of wind. Their roots spread wide and deep to anchor them against storms. Their bark is often thick and fire-resistant. They are the survivors, the champions, the individuals that have outlasted all the challenges the forest could throw at them. Some emergent trees are over 1,000 years old. living witnesses to centuries of change. The crowns of emergent trees create unique habitats found nowhere else in the forest. Fully exposed to sunlight, they host communities of epiphytes and insects that cannot survive in the shadier canopy below. Birds nest in their highest branches, enjoying panoramic views that let them spot predators and prey from great distances. Eagles and other large raptors prefer emergent trees for their nests precisely because of this visibility. The emergent layer is the penthouse of the forest, the highest and most exclusive real estate, occupied only by those species that can tolerate its extreme conditions. Butterflies and other flying insects sometimes spend their entire lives moving between the crowns of emergent trees, never descending into the canopy below. They feed on the flowers that bloom at these heights, mate in the open air above the forest, and lay their eggs on the leaves of emergent species. For these creatures, the canopy is as distant as the ground. Their world is defined by the scattered crowns of the tallest trees and the bright sky above them. They are inhabitants of a layer so thin and so high that most people never even think to look for them. Emergent trees often fruit at different times than the trees in the canopy below, ensuring that food is available year-round for the animals that can reach them. This staggered timing is not accidental. It is the result of millions of years of evolution, during which trees that fruited when others did not had a competitive advantage in attracting seed dispersers. The emergent layer has its own calendar, its own rhythms, out of sync with the canopy beneath. Animals that can move between layers have access to a more reliable food supply, while those confined to one layer must cope with seasons of scarcity. Lightning strikes the emergent trees more often than any others in the forest. Standing above everything else, they are natural lightning rods, and over their long lives, most emergent trees are struck multiple times. These strikes can kill branches or even split trunks, but they can also create something valuable: hollows. A lightning-scarred cavity in an emergent tree becomes a home for birds, bats, insects, and mammals. The damage done by the storm creates shelter for generations of creatures that could not otherwise survive at these heights. Even destruction in the forest becomes creation. Now we descend. Down from the treetops and the blazing sun, down through the canopy and the understory and the forest floor, down further still, into the earth itself. We are leaving the world of light behind. Ahead lies a different kind of hidden world, one where the sun has never shone and never will. We are entering the realm of caves, and the first thing we must pass through is the threshold between light and darkness. Cave entrances are zones of transition, places where the outside world meets the inside world, and neither fully dominates. Light still reaches here, though it is dim and filtered. Air still moves, though it is cooler and damper than outside. Plants still grow, though they are specialized for low light. The twilight zone, as this region is called, is neither fully cave nor fully surface. It is a borderland, and like all borderlands, it hosts a unique community of creatures adapted to its in-between conditions. The gradient from light to darkness happens faster than you might expect. In most caves, the twilight zone extends only a few tens of meters from the entrance. Beyond that, the light fades to nothing, and permanent darkness begins. But within that narrow band, conditions change dramatically. Temperature becomes more stable. Humidity rises. The air grows still. For creatures that cannot tolerate the variability of the surface world, but cannot survive in total darkness either. The twilight zone is the only place they can live. Ferns and mosses cluster at cave mouths, where humidity is constant and light is gentle. These plants cannot tolerate the full sun and dry air of open ground, but they thrive in the sheltered conditions of cave entrances. Some species are found almost exclusively in these habitats, having evolved to exploit the narrow niche where cave meets surface. Their presence marks the beginning of the transition, the first sign that you are leaving the familiar world behind. Bats often roost in the twilight zones of caves, hanging from walls and ceilings in clusters that can number in the thousands. They choose these locations because they offer protection from predators and weather, while remaining close enough to the entrance for easy exit at dusk. When evening comes, the bats pour out of the cave in great swirling clouds, dispersing into the night to hunt insects. At dawn, they return, folding their wings and settling back into the darkness to sleep through the day. The twilight zone is their bedroom, a safe and stable refuge from the chaos of the outside world. Cave swiftlets, small birds that live in Southeast Asian caves, navigate the twilight zone using echolocation. Unlike most birds, which rely entirely on vision, swiftlets produce rapid clicking sounds and listen for the echoes to build a mental map of their surroundings. This ability allows them to fly in near total darkness, navigating the complex interior of caves where light cannot reach. They build their nests on cave walls using their own saliva, a substance so prized in some cultures that it is harvested and sold for making soup. The swiftlets have evolved a solution to the challenge of living in darkness that parallels what bats discovered millions of years earlier. Temperature in the twilight zone remains more stable than the air outside, while surface temperatures swing between day and night, summer and winter. The cave entrance maintains a more constant climate. This stability is valuable to creatures that cannot regulate their own body temperature. Cold-blooded animals like salamanders and insects can remain active in the twilight zone even when it would be too hot or too cold for them outside. The cave buffers them from extremes, providing a refuge where conditions are predictable. Some insects spend their entire lives in the twilight zones of caves, never venturing into the full darkness deeper inside or the bright world outside. These are specialists, adapted to the particular mix of dim light, high humidity, and stable temperature that the twilight zone provides. They feed on organic matter that washes or blows in from outside, on the droppings of bats, on the fungi that grow in the damp conditions. Their world is small, perhaps only a few meters deep, but it is enough. Cave entrances act as funnels, channeling nutrients from the outside world into the deeper passages. Leaves blow in and accumulate on the floor. Insects wander in and become trapped. Water flows in, carrying dissolved organic matter. Bats roost near the entrance and deposit guano that supports entire food chains deeper inside. The twilight zone is not just a transition. It is a gateway through which energy flows from the sunlit world into the dark one. Without cave entrances, the ecosystems deeper inside would starve. Predators like spiders often station themselves at cave entrances, taking advantage of the insects that are drawn to the humidity and shelter. Webs stretch across the passage, catching flies and moths that venture too close. These spiders are not specialized cave dwellers. They are opportunists, exploiting a rich hunting ground at the boundary between worlds. They benefit from the flow of life that moves through the twilight zone, feeding on the traffic between light and darkness. The walls of the twilight zone host unique communities of algae and bacteria that can survive in the dim conditions. These microbes form thin films on rock surfaces, feeding on the faint light that penetrates the entrance and on nutrients that seep through the stone. They are the foundation of a simple food chain, grazed upon by tiny invertebrates that are in turn eaten by larger creatures. Even in the twilight zone, where conditions are marginal, life finds a way to establish itself and build communities. As we move deeper, the last traces of light fade away. We are entering the deep cave, a world of total and permanent darkness. No sun has ever reached here. No photon from outside has ever touched these walls. The darkness is absolute. Not the darkness of a cloudy night or a shuttered room, but a darkness so complete that it has no reference to light at all. In this world, eyes are useless. The creatures that live here have often lost them entirely. They navigate by touch, by smell, by senses we barely understand, and yet they thrive. Deep caves exist in total darkness, and the creatures that live there have adapted in remarkable ways. Many cave-adapted animals are blind, their eyes reduced to vestiges or absent entirely. Without light, there is no advantage to sight, and the energy that would be spent building and maintaining eyes can be used elsewhere. Some cave fish have only shallow depressions where eyes would normally be. Some cave insects have no trace of eyes at all. They have traded vision for other abilities, heightened senses of touch and smell and vibration that serve them better in a world without light. Without light, there can be no photosynthesis, and without photosynthesis, there can be no plants. The food webs of deep caves are built on entirely different foundations than those of the surface world. In some caves, the base of the food chain is bacteria that feed on minerals in the rock itself. These chemosynthetic bacteria extract energy from chemical reactions, oxidizing sulfur or iron or other compounds to power their metabolism. They coat cave walls in thin films, providing food for invertebrates that graze on them. The ecosystem runs on chemistry, not sunlight. Cave fish navigate through their dark world by sensing tiny changes in water pressure. Along their bodies, they have specialized organs called lateral lines that detect the movement of water around them. When they swim near a wall or another fish, the water pressure changes in subtle ways, and the lateral line picks up these changes, building a picture of the surroundings without any need for light. This sense is highly refined in cave fish, allowing them to move through complex environments, avoid obstacles, and find food in absolute darkness. Albinism is common among deep cave creatures. Without light, there is no need for pigment, and producing pigment costs energy. Over generations, cave populations often lose their coloration, becoming pale or translucent. Cave crayfish are ghostly white. Cave salamanders are pink or yellow. Cave insects may be nearly colorless. This loss of pigment is not a defect. It is an adaptation, a way of saving resources in an environment where coloration provides no benefit. The creatures of the deep cave have shed everything they do not need. Some cave species have existed in their dark environments for millions of years, long enough to become so specialized that they can no longer survive outside. These obligate cave dwellers are found nowhere else on Earth. Each cave system may host its own unique species, evolved in isolation over vast stretches of time. A single cave in Texas might contain species found in no other cave. A limestone system in Slovenia might harbor creatures that exist nowhere else in the universe. Deep caves are islands of evolution. laboratories of adaptation sealed away from the rest of the world. The longest-lived vertebrate known to inhabit caves is a salamander called the olm, native to the caves of southeastern Europe. This pale, blind creature can live for over 100 years, an extraordinary lifespan for an amphibian. Its metabolism is extremely slow, an adaptation to the scarcity of food in the cave environment. It can survive for years without eating, waiting in the darkness for prey to come within reach. The olm has been known to science for centuries, and in that time, individual olms have lived and died in the same pools where they were first discovered, patient witnesses to human generations passing above. Cave ecosystems are extraordinarily fragile. A single human visit can introduce changes that take decades or centuries to reverse. The oils from a fingerprint on a cave wall can alter the microbial community growing there. A flashlight can disturb creatures that have never experienced light. Trash left behind can introduce chemicals that poison the water. Heat from a human body can raise the temperature of a small chamber. Caves have evolved in isolation for so long that even minor disturbances can ripple through the ecosystem. Those who study caves do so with extreme care, aware that their presence is itself an impact. Guano, the accumulated droppings of bats, provides the energy that sustains many deep cave ecosystems. Bats feed outside the cave, consuming vast quantities of insects each night, and then return to their roosts to digest and defecate. The guano piles up beneath their roosts, sometimes many feet deep, and becomes the foundation of a food chain. Bacteria and fungi break down the guano. Beetles and flies feed on the bacteria. Spiders and centipedes hunt the beetles and flies. Without the bats bringing energy in from outside, these deeper communities could not exist. The air inside deep caves is often different from surface air. It may contain higher concentrations of carbon dioxide, released by the respiration of organisms and the chemical reactions of rock. It may have lower oxygen levels in poorly ventilated passages. It may carry traces of gases like radon, seeping up from radioactive minerals deep underground. Explorers who enter deep caves sometimes feel lightheaded or short of breath, not because of fear, but because of the altered atmosphere. The air itself is strange in these places, a reminder that they are separate from the world above. Stalactites and stalagmites, the iconic formations of caves, grow at almost inconceivably slow rates. A stalactite may add only a fraction of a millimeter per year, building its length drop by drop over thousands or millions of years. The formations you see in a cave are the work of deep time, geological patience beyond human comprehension. A large stalactite may have begun forming before our species existed. A thick stalagmite may record in its layers the chemical history of water filtering through the rock above, a timeline written in stone. Some caves have been sealed from the outside world for millions of years, preserving ancient atmospheres and isolated ecosystems. When scientists break into these sealed chambers, they find air that has not circulated with the outside world since before humans existed. They find creatures that have evolved in complete isolation, cut off from all genetic exchange with their relatives above. These caves are time capsules, windows into evolutionary pasts that no longer exist anywhere else. Opening them is like opening a tomb, except what lies inside is not dead, but has been quietly living all along. Cave creatures often have heightened senses other than vision. Their antennae may be longer and more sensitive. Their ability to detect vibrations through rock or water may be refined beyond anything found in surface species. They can sense the presence of predators or prey from tiny tremors in their environment, movements too subtle for sighted creatures to notice. In the absence of light, other senses have expanded to fill the gap. The dark is not empty to those who have learned to perceive it differently. Beyond the caves themselves, hidden rivers flow through the rock. These underground waterways have carved passages through limestone and other soluble stones over millions of years, creating the very caves we have been exploring. But the rivers continue deeper and further than the caves, flowing through darkness for hundreds of miles, emerging sometimes in springs, far from where they began. The water that enters the ground in one place may surface again in a place that seems completely unconnected. Below the surface, the hydrology is a hidden network, a secret plumbing system that links distant landscapes through the rock. Underground rivers can flow for extraordinary distances without ever seeing daylight. In some karst regions, where limestone underlies the surface, water may travel dozens or even hundreds of miles through subterranean channels before emerging again. These rivers have their own ecosystems, populated by blind fish and translucent crayfish and other creatures adapted to the dark. They are highways of the underground world, connecting cave systems that would otherwise be isolated. A creature born in one cave might drift downstream to another, carrying genes across the hidden geography of the rock. Aquifers, the vast underground reservoirs of water held in porous rock, contain more fresh water than all the world's lakes and rivers combined. About 30% of Earth's fresh water is stored in aquifers, accumulated over thousands or millions of years. When rain falls on the surface, some of it soaks into the ground, percolating slowly through soil and rock until it reaches the water table. There it joins the aquifer, a pool of water held in the tiny spaces between grains of sand or in the cracks and cavities of stone. This water may have fallen as rain thousands of years ago, ancient moisture stored in the earth like a savings account. Blind crayfish and cave shrimp inhabit underground streams, living out their lives in water that has never reflected the sun. These creatures are pale and delicate, their exoskeletons thin, because there is no need for the armor that protects their surface relatives from light and predators. They move slowly, conserving energy in an environment where food is scarce. They may live for decades, reproducing rarely, growing slowly, waiting in the dark for whatever the current brings them. They are patient beings, shaped by scarcity into forms of quiet endurance. The underground rivers that flow through limestone have carved many of the great cave systems of the world. Water dissolves limestone slowly, molecule by molecule, widening cracks into passages and passages into chambers over geological time. The caves we explore today are the abandoned channels of ancient rivers, left dry when the water table dropped or the river found a lower route. The formations on the walls and ceilings are the decorations left behind by water that has long since moved on. Every cave is a history of water written in stone. Some aquifers span multiple countries, connecting regions that seem entirely separate on the surface. The Guarani Aquifer in South America underlies parts of Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. The Nubian Sandstone Aquifer stretches beneath Libya, Egypt, Chad, and Sudan. These vast underground reservoirs ignore political boundaries, linking nations through the water they share. What happens to the aquifer in one country can affect the water supply in another. The hidden water unites what the surface divides. The Edwards Aquifer in Texas hosts a unique community of creatures found nowhere else on Earth. In its springs and underground passages live blind salamanders, eyeless catfish, and tiny crustaceans that have evolved in isolation for millions of years. These endemic species depend entirely on the aquifer. If the water is overpumped or polluted, they have no other home. The aquifer is not just a water supply for the cities and farms above. It is a refuge for life that cannot exist anywhere else, a hidden ark beneath the Texas hills. Underground lakes can be eerily still, undisturbed by wind or weather. The surface of an underground lake may be so calm that it reflects the cave ceiling perfectly, creating an illusion of infinite depth. Divers who explore these lakes describe a silence and stillness unlike anything on the surface, a sense of entering a world that has been waiting, unchanged, for longer than humans have existed. The water is often crystal clear, filtered by its passage through rock, revealing formations and creatures that seem to float in empty space. Water in aquifers is naturally filtered as it passes through layers of sand and rock. The tiny pores in the stone trap particles and microbes, allowing only pure water to pass through. This is why well water is often so clean and clear, why springs that emerge from deep aquifers are prized for their purity. The earth itself acts as a filter, a slow and patient purifier that has been cleaning water for as long as water and rock have existed together. The groundwater we drink today has been filtered by stone that was old when the dinosaurs walked above it. Overpumping aquifers can cause the land above to sink, a process called subsidence. When water is withdrawn faster than it can be replaced, the pore spaces in the rock compress, and the ground settles downward. In some areas, subsidence has lowered the surface by many feet over the past century. Buildings crack, roads buckle. Land that was once above water now floods regularly. And the damage is irreversible. Once the rock compresses, it cannot expand again. The aquifer's capacity is permanently reduced. What took millions of years to create can be diminished in a single human lifetime. The hidden waters of the underground connect the surface world to depths we rarely consider. Rain that falls on a hillside may not reach the ocean for thousands of years, spending centuries in the slow passage through rock. The water we drink may have been underground since before our great-grandparents were born. The rivers beneath our feet may link landscapes that seem entirely separate. We live above a world of water, a network of hidden reservoirs and channels that sustains the green world above, even as it remains invisible to us. The groundwater asks nothing and gives everything, a quiet gift from the darkness below. And so we have traveled from the sunlit canopy to the lightless depths. We have climbed into the treetops where creatures live and die without ever touching the ground. We have descended through cave entrances into the twilight zone, and from there into the absolute darkness where blind creatures navigate by senses we can barely imagine. We have followed underground rivers and discovered the vast aquifers that hold more fresh water than all the lakes and rivers on the surface of the earth. These hidden worlds are layered beneath and above the landscape we know, stacked in dimensions we rarely perceive. The canopy floats above us like a second forest. The caves and aquifers thread beneath us like a second country. And all of it is connected, water moving from canopy to soil, to aquifer to spring, energy flowing from sunlight to leaves to litter to the creatures of the dark. The hidden worlds are not separate from the visible world. They are woven through it, sustaining it, shaping it in ways we are only beginning to understand. Rest now if you wish. Let the image of underground rivers carry you somewhere deeper and more still. Let the darkness of caves feel not empty but full, populated by patient creatures waiting in silence. The journey continues, down into the ocean and into worlds stranger still. But for now, this is enough. The hidden worlds will be here when you return. Now we leave the land behind. We step from solid ground onto wet rock, and then into water, and then deeper still, into a realm that covers most of our planet, yet remains more mysterious than the surface of the moon. The ocean is the largest hidden world of all. We see its surface glittering in the sunlight, watch its waves roll onto beaches, feel its salt spray on our faces. But what lies beneath is mostly unknown to us. The ocean is deep in ways that defy intuition. It is dark in ways that have no parallel on land. It is home to creatures so strange they seem more like dreams than living things. And it has been here far longer than we have, holding secrets that may never fully be revealed. We begin at the edge, where the sea meets the shore, in the small and temporary worlds called tide pools. These are not permanent features of the coast. They appear when the tide goes out, filling depressions in the rock with trapped seawater, and they vanish when the tide returns, merging back into the vastness of the ocean. For the creatures that live in them, tide pools are entire universes, complete ecosystems contained in spaces no bigger than a bathtub. And yet these small worlds are among the harshest habitats on Earth, demanding extraordinary resilience from everything that calls them home. Each tide pool is a self-contained ecosystem that resets twice a day. When the tide goes out, the pool is cut off from the ocean, isolated and exposed. The water heats up in the sun or cools in the wind. Oxygen levels drop as creatures breathe and algae photosynthesize. Salinity rises as water evaporates or plummets when rain falls. Then the tide returns, flushing the pool with fresh seawater, equalizing temperature and chemistry, reconnecting the miniature world to the greater sea. The creatures that live here must survive both states, the isolation and the reconnection, the extremes and the relief. Tide pool creatures endure temperature swings that would kill most marine life. On a sunny day, a shallow pool can heat by 20 or 30 degrees in a matter of hours. On a cold night, the same pool might approach freezing. The animals that live here have evolved tolerance for these extremes that their open ocean relatives cannot match. Anemones close up to conserve moisture. Mussels seal their shells tight. Crabs wedge themselves into crevices where the temperature is more stable. Every creature has a strategy for surviving the daily ordeal of exposure. Sea anemones, those flower-like animals that wave their tentacles in the current, can reproduce by cloning themselves. A single anemone can split into two, and those two can split again, creating colonies of genetically identical individuals that carpet the rocks of a tide pool. This ability to clone allows anemones to rapidly colonize favorable habitat. It also means that what looks like many separate animals may in fact be one organism spread across the pool in multiple bodies. The anemone has found a way to be everywhere at once, increasing its chances of catching food and surviving disaster. Hermit crabs, those small crustaceans that live in borrowed shells, engage in a remarkable behavior when they need to upgrade their homes. When a hermit crab finds a shell that is too big for it, but notices other crabs nearby, it waits. Other crabs arrive and inspect the shell. If it is too big for them as well, they wait too. Eventually, a line forms, a queue of crabs arranged in order of size, each waiting for the shell exchange to begin. When a crab of the right size finally claims the large shell, it leaves its old shell behind, and the next crab in line moves in. The exchange cascades down the line, each crab moving into the shell vacated by the crab ahead of it. Cooperation emerges from competition, and everyone ends up with a better home. The algae that grow in tide pools produce a significant portion of the oxygen generated along coastlines. These small plants, clinging to rocks and swaying in the trapped water, photosynthesize just like their counterparts on land. They take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, feeding the water with the gas that animals need to breathe. When the tide is out and the pool is isolated, the oxygen produced by algae during the day can make the water rich and breathable. But at night, when photosynthesis stops and respiration continues, oxygen levels can drop dangerously low. The chemistry of a tide pool swings between extremes, and everything in it must ride the pendulum. Starfish, or sea stars as scientists prefer to call them, possess an almost supernatural ability to regenerate. If a starfish loses an arm to a predator, it can grow a new one over time. More remarkably, in some species, a severed arm can regenerate an entire new body. A single starfish can become two. This ability makes starfish extraordinarily resilient. Predators that tear them apart may only succeed in creating more starfish. The regeneration is slow, taking months or even years to complete, but in the long life of a tide pool, time is not scarce. Patience is rewarded. Limpets, those small conical creatures that cling to rocks, display a homing behavior that borders on the uncanny. Each limpet has a home spot, a particular place on the rock where its shell has worn a perfect fit against the stone. When the tide comes in and the limpet moves off to graze on algae, it travels across the rock, scraping food from the surface. But when the tide goes out and the danger of desiccation returns, the limpet finds its way back to its home spot, often traveling the same path it took outward. How it navigates is not fully understood, but the limpet returns, settling into its custom-fit depression, sealing itself against the rock to wait out the exposure. No two tide pools are exactly alike, even when they are only a few feet apart. One pool might be dominated by mussels, another by anemones, a third by algae. The differences arise from subtle variations in depth, exposure, water flow, and history. A pool that receives more wave splash stays cooler and wetter. A pool with a sandy bottom hosts different creatures than one with bare rock. The first species to colonize after a disturbance may determine the community for years to come. Each tide pool is the product of its particular circumstances, a unique solution to the problem of living at the edge of the sea. Some tide pool fish can breathe air and hop between pools when their home becomes inhospitable. These amphibious fish, like mud skippers and certain blennies, have evolved the ability to extract oxygen from the atmosphere using modified gills and through their skin. When a pool overheats or runs low on oxygen, they can leave it, wriggling across wet rock to find a better refuge. They cannot survive long out of water, but they do not need to. The next pool is only a few hops away. These fish have blurred the line between aquatic and terrestrial life, finding a niche at the very boundary of the sea. Chitons, those oval creatures that cling to rocks like living shields, have hundreds of tiny eyes embedded in their shells. These eyes are unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. They are made of aragonite, the same mineral that forms the shell itself, and they can detect light and shadow, allowing the chiton to sense when a predator passes overhead. The chiton cannot see images the way we do, but it can perceive changes in brightness, enough to know when to clamp down harder against the rock. Its shell is not just armor. It is a sensory organ, watching the world from hundreds of tiny windows. The splash zone above the tide pools hosts its own community of specialists. This region is wetted by spray but rarely submerged, too dry for most marine creatures and too salty for most terrestrial ones. Yet life persists here. Barnacles cement themselves to rock and close their shells between wettings. Periwinkle snails graze on thin films of algae. Lichens crust the highest rocks, surviving on occasional spray and fog. The splash zone is another borderland, another in-between place where only the adaptable can thrive. It is the last outpost of the ocean, the highest reach of the tide. Tide pools must withstand the relentless pounding of waves. Every storm sends water crashing against the rocks with tremendous force. Creatures that cannot cling tightly are torn away and lost. Those that remain have evolved powerful methods of attachment. Mussels anchor themselves with byssal threads, protein fibers stronger than steel by weight. Barnacles glue themselves to rock with a cement that engineers are still trying to replicate. Limpets create suction with their muscular feet. The tide pool community is built on holding on resisting the force that would sweep everything away. Now, we move beyond the tide pools, out past the breaking waves, and into a forest that grows beneath the surface of the sea. This is the kelp forest, one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth, and one of the most beautiful. Giant kelp rises from the seafloor like underwater redwoods, stretching toward the light 100 feet or more above. Fish swim between the fronds as birds fly between branches. Seals and sea lions hunt in the canopy. Otters float on the surface, wrapped in kelp to keep from drifting away. The kelp forest is a cathedral made of living gold, swaying gently in the currents, filtering the light into green and amber and shadow. Giant kelp is one of the fastest growing organisms on Earth. Under ideal conditions, it can grow nearly 2 feet in a single day, racing toward the sunlight that fuels its photosynthesis. This extraordinary growth rate allows kelp to form dense forests in just a few years, transforming barren seafloors into rich habitats teeming with life. But the same rapid growth makes kelp vulnerable. It cannot store much energy in its tissues. If conditions deteriorate, the kelp can collapse as quickly as it arose, leaving behind a desolate seascape where a forest once stood. Kelp forests support more species per square meter than almost any other marine ecosystem. The structure they provide, the vertical complexity of fronds and stipes and holdfasts, creates habitat for creatures that could not survive on a flat, open sea floor. Small fish shelter among the fronds, hiding from predators. Invertebrates cling to the stipes, filtering food from the passing water. Crabs and urchins live among the holdfasts, the root-like structures that anchor kelp to the rock. Every layer of the kelp forest hosts its own community, its own web of interactions, its own hidden world within the larger one. Sea otters are keystone species in kelp forests, and their presence or absence can determine whether the forest exists at all. Otters eat sea urchins, the spiny creatures that graze on kelp. When otters are present, urchin populations stay low and the kelp can grow. When otters are removed by hunting or disease, urchin populations explode. The urchins devour the kelp, eating through the holdfasts and toppling the great fronds. Within a few years, a lush forest can become an urchin barren, a wasteland of bare rock and spiny grazers. The fate of an entire ecosystem rests on the appetite of a single predator. Kelp does not have roots in the way that land plants do. Instead, it anchors itself to rock with holdfasts, structures that grip the stone but do not penetrate it or absorb nutrients from it. All of the nutrition that kelp needs is absorbed directly from the water through its fronds. Nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon dioxide, and trace minerals all pass through the surface of the kelp, taken up wherever they are needed. This is why kelp can grow so fast. It does not wait for nutrients to travel up from roots. Every part of its body is in contact with its food source. The entire ocean feeds it. Kelp forests dampen the energy of waves, protecting coastlines from erosion. As waves pass through a kelp bed, they lose momentum, their force absorbed by the flexible fronds. By the time the waves reach shore, they are gentler, less destructive. This protection benefits not only the creatures that live in the kelp forest, but also the human communities on the coast. Where kelp forests have been destroyed, shorelines have eroded more rapidly, beaches have narrowed, and coastal infrastructure has suffered increased damage. The kelp forest is not just a habitat. It is a living breakwater. Kelp forests, like terrestrial forests, have canopy layers that create structure and stratify the environment. The upper canopy, where the fronds spread across the surface of the water, receives the most light and hosts sun-loving species. Below, in the midwater, light is dimmer and the community changes. Near the seafloor, in the shade of all the kelp above, yet another set of species makes its home. Fish and invertebrates move between these layers as conditions change, rising to feed in the canopy at night or descending to shelter in the holdfasts during the day. The kelp forest is three-dimensional in a way that few land habitats can match. Sea urchin barrens, the desolate landscapes left behind when urchins devour a kelp forest, can persist for decades without recovery. Once the kelp is gone, the urchins have little to eat, but they can survive for years in a state of near starvation, waiting for any new kelp growth to appear and promptly consuming it. This creates a stable but impoverished state, a landscape locked in barrenness by the very creatures that created it. Breaking the cycle requires reducing urchin numbers, often through the return of predators like otters or through human intervention. Without such a reset, the barren endures. Kelp forests exist only in cold, nutrient-rich waters, which is why they are found along the coasts of temperate regions rather than in tropical seas. The cold water holds more dissolved oxygen and more nutrients than warm water, fueling the rapid growth that kelp requires. Upwelling currents, which bring deep, nutrient-rich water to the surface, are especially important. Where upwelling is strong, kelp forests can be magnificent. Where it weakens, due to climate shifts or changes in ocean circulation, kelp forests can decline and disappear. Gray whales sometimes shelter their calves in kelp forests to hide from orcas. The dense canopy of fronds obscures vision and muffles sound, making it harder for the predators to locate their prey. The mother whale guides her calf into the kelp and waits, holding still among the swaying fronds while the orcas search nearby. This behavior has been observed along the coast of California, where kelp forests provide refuge for some of the largest animals on Earth. Even giants need hiding places, and the kelp forest offers one of the few available in the open ocean. Now we leave the kelp forests behind and enter a hidden world that rivals them in complexity and far exceeds them in age. The coral reef is a city built by animals, a structure of limestone laid down over thousands of years by creatures no bigger than a pencil eraser. From a distance, a reef looks like a solid formation, a ridge of rock encrusted with color. But up close, every inch is alive. Polyps extend their tentacles to feed. Fish dart between crevices. Shrimp clean parasites from larger animals at designated stations. The reef is a community so dense and interconnected that it has been compared to a rainforest. And like a rainforest, it is one of the great wonders of the living world. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, yet they support roughly a quarter of all marine species. This extraordinary concentration of life arises from the structure that corals create. Every crevice, every overhang, every hollow in the reef is habitat for something. Fish hide in cracks barely wider than their bodies. Eels lurk in tubes. Octopuses squeeze into holes that seem impossibly small. The reef is a maze, a labyrinth, a three-dimensional puzzle filled with life. Remove the structure and the community collapses. The reef is not just where these creatures live. It is what makes their lives possible. Corals are animals, not plants, though the confusion is understandable. Each coral colony is made up of thousands of tiny polyps, soft-bodied creatures related to jellyfish and anemones. The polyps secrete calcium carbonate, building the hard skeleton that gives the reef its structure. Most reef-building corals also host symbiotic algae within their tissues, microscopic partners called zooxanthellae that photosynthesize and share the sugars they produce with their coral host. This partnership allows corals to thrive in nutrient-poor tropical waters, capturing energy from sunlight even though they are animals. The coral is a chimera, animal and plant, fused into a single living system. Reefs grow slowly, adding only a few centimeters of new skeleton each year under the best conditions. The vast structures we see today, some stretching for hundreds of miles, took thousands of years to build. Generation after generation of polyps lived and died, each adding its small contribution to the growing mass. The Great Barrier Reef, visible from space, began forming around 20,000 years ago, when sea levels rose after the last ice age. It has been growing ever since. A project so vast and so patient that it dwarfs any human construction. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth, stretching for more than 1,400 miles along the coast of Australia. It is home to over 1,500 species of fish, 400 species of coral, and countless other creatures. It can be seen from orbit, a ribbon of turquoise and white against the blue of the ocean. The reef is so large that it creates its own weather patterns, its own ocean currents, its own microclimate. It is not just an ecosystem. It is a geographic feature, a presence on the planet as significant as any mountain range or river system. Once a year, on nights following the full moon in late spring, corals across an entire reef spawn simultaneously. Billions of tiny bundles of eggs and sperm are released into the water, creating a blizzard of reproductive material that clouds the sea. This synchronized spawning increases the chances of successful fertilization. If corals released their gametes at random times, most would never find a partner. But by spawning together, triggered by the same cues of temperature and lunar light, they fill the water with so many eggs and sperm that fertilization becomes almost inevitable. The event lasts only a few nights each year, and witnessing it is one of the great spectacles of the natural world. Parrotfish play an essential role in the reef ecosystem, and they leave behind an unexpected legacy. These colorful fish have powerful beaks that they use to scrape algae from coral surfaces. In the process, they also bite off chunks of coral skeleton, which they grind up and digest. What comes out the other end is sand, fine white coral sand that accumulates on beaches and seafloors throughout the tropics. A single large parrotfish can produce hundreds of pounds of sand each year. Much of the white sand on tropical beaches is quite literally parrotfish excrement. The beaches we walk on are the product of countless fish, eating countless reefs over countless years. Cleaning stations are specific locations on a reef where small fish and shrimp offer grooming services to larger animals. A cleaner wrasse or cleaner shrimp will set up at a particular spot and advertise its services through distinctive colors and movements. Larger fish, even predators that would normally eat small fish, approach the station and hold still, opening their mouths and flaring their gills. The cleaners move over the larger animal's body, picking off parasites and dead tissue. Both parties benefit. The cleaner gets a meal. The client gets relief from irritation and disease. Trust prevails in a world otherwise defined by eating and being eaten. Some corals produce fluorescent pigments that make them glow in brilliant colors under certain light conditions. These pigments may serve multiple purposes. They can protect the coral from intense sunlight, absorbing harmful wavelengths, and re-emitting them as less damaging colors. They may also enhance the light available to the symbiotic algae within the coral, boosting photosynthesis in deeper water. Whatever their function, the effect is stunning. Under ultraviolet light, a coral reef can transform into a landscape of neon greens, electric blues, and vivid pinks, a hidden beauty visible only to those who know how to look. Coral reefs have existed in some form for over 500 million years, surviving multiple mass extinctions and profound changes in ocean chemistry. The reefs we see today are not the same as ancient reefs. The coral species are different, the associated communities have changed, and the physical structures have waxed and waned with the ages. But the basic phenomenon, animals building massive calcium carbonate structures that support diverse communities, has persisted across geological time. Reefs are one of evolution's great inventions, refined over 500 million years into the complex ecosystems we see today. A single coral reef can contain thousands of species living in intricate balance. Herbivores graze on algae, preventing it from smothering the coral. Predators control herbivore populations, preventing overgrazing. Scavengers consume the dead, recycling nutrients back into the system. Parasites, cleaners, hosts, and symbionts interact in webs of relationship too complex to fully map. Every species plays a role, and removing one can trigger cascades that affect many others. The reef is not just a collection of creatures. It is a community, interdependent in ways that we are still trying to understand. Night transforms a coral reef. As the sun sets, the creatures of the day retreat into crevices and sleeping spots, and the creatures of the night emerge. Moray eels leave their holes to hunt. Octopuses prowl the reef, changing color and texture as they move. Basket stars unfurl their branching arms to filter feed from the current. Bioluminescent organisms begin to glow. The reef that seemed so familiar during the day becomes a different world, populated by a different cast of characters following different rules. For every reef, there are really two reefs, the day reef and the night reef, sharing the same space but rarely the same time. Coral can survive bleaching events if conditions improve quickly enough. Bleaching occurs when stressed corals expel their symbiotic algae, losing the color and the nutrition the algae provide. A bleached coral is not dead, but it is starving. If the stress is temporary, if water temperatures drop or other conditions improve, the coral can reacquire algae and recover. But if the stress persists, the coral weakens and eventually dies. Reefs around the world have experienced mass bleaching events in recent decades, and some have recovered, while others have not. The outcome depends on how quickly and how completely the stress is relieved. Artificial reefs, structures sunk deliberately to provide habitat, can attract marine life and offer some of the functions of natural reefs. Shipwrecks, concrete blocks, decommissioned oil platforms, and purpose-built structures have all been used to create artificial reefs. Fish colonize them, invertebrates encrust them. Within a few years, an artificial reef can become a thriving habitat. But artificial reefs cannot replicate the complexity of natural coral reefs. They lack the fine structure, the chemical cues, the evolutionary relationships that make natural reefs so productive. Artificial reefs are supplements, not substitutes. The real thing remains irreplaceable. Below the sunlit waters where coral reefs and kelp forests thrive, the ocean descends into a realm of perpetual twilight. This is the mesopelagic zone, the middle layer of the sea, stretching from about 200 meters down to 1,000 meters. Light still penetrates here, but barely. What reaches these depths is a dim blue glow, fading toward blackness as you descend. The creatures of the twilight zone live in a world of shadows, where vision still matters, but darkness is always encroaching. And there are far more of them than scientists once believed. More fish live in the ocean's twilight zone than in all other ocean zones combined. Recent estimates suggest that the biomass of mesopelagic fish may exceed 10 billion tons, several times greater than all the fish caught by humans each year. These fish are mostly small, a few inches long, with large eyes and silvery bodies. They include lanternfish, hatchetfish, and bristlemouths, species unfamiliar to most people, but extraordinarily abundant in the deep. We have only begun to understand this community. The twilight zone is one of the least explored ecosystems on Earth. The twilight zone is home to the largest animal migration on the planet, and it happens every single day. As the sun sets, billions of creatures rise from the depths toward the surface to feed under cover of darkness. Fish, squid, shrimp, and jellyfish ascend hundreds of meters, following the fading light. They spend the night grazing on the plankton that flourish near the surface, then descend again at dawn, retreating to the safety of the twilight zone before predators can find them. This vertical migration moves more biomass than any other migration on Earth, and it happens continuously, night after night, across every ocean. Sunlight fades to nothing in the twilight zone, and the creatures that live there have evolved remarkable adaptations to cope with the darkness. Many have enormous eyes, proportionally far larger than the eyes of surface fish, designed to capture every available photon. Others have abandoned vision entirely, relying on other senses to navigate and find food. Still others produce their own light, bioluminescence that serves purposes ranging from communication to camouflage to hunting. The twilight zone is a world where light is precious, and creatures have found countless ways to use it, make it, or do without it. Some fish in the twilight zone have evolved transparent bodies that render them nearly invisible. Without pigment to absorb or reflect light, their bodies simply let light pass through. A predator looking at a transparent fish sees not the fish, but whatever lies beyond it. This adaptation is most effective in the dim conditions of the twilight zone, where there is just enough light to see, but not enough to reveal subtle details. In the brighter waters above, transparency would offer less advantage. In the darkness below, it would be irrelevant. The transparent fish have found a niche in the in-between. The twilight zone sequesters vast amounts of carbon that would otherwise contribute to atmospheric warming. When creatures from the twilight zone eat organic material at the surface and then descend to the depths, they carry carbon with them. When they defecate, die, or are eaten at depth, that carbon is released into the deep ocean, where it can remain for centuries or millennia. This biological pump transfers carbon from the atmosphere to the abyss, helping to regulate the climate. If twilight zone communities were disrupted, this carbon sequestration could be reduced, with consequences for the entire planet. Gelatinous creatures dominate much of the twilight zone. Jellies, siphonophores, comb jellies, and other soft-bodied animals drift through the dim water in astonishing numbers. They are fragile and difficult to study. Traditional nets destroy them. Even careful collection often damages their delicate tissues. Only with the advent of submersibles and remotely operated vehicles have scientists been able to observe them in their natural habitat, and what they have found has overturned old assumptions. The twilight zone is not empty water. It is filled with gelatinous life, a community of drifters that forms a crucial link in the ocean's food web. Pressure in the twilight zone would crush a human diver and can destroy equipment not designed to withstand it. At a depth of 500 meters, the pressure is roughly 50 times greater than at the surface. At 1,000 meters, it is 100 times greater. Creatures that live at these depths have evolved bodies that function under pressure that would be instantly fatal to us. Their cells, their enzymes, their membranes are all adapted to the crushing weight of the water above. When brought to the surface, many twilight zone creatures cannot survive the sudden release of pressure. Their bodies are tuned to a world we can barely visit. Scientists estimate that we have discovered less than 10% of the species living in the twilight zone. The region is vast, covering more volume than all the land habitats on Earth combined. It is difficult to reach, difficult to sample, and difficult to study. Most of what we know comes from brief expeditions and fleeting observations. The creatures that live there are often small, fast, and adept at avoiding capture. Every expedition to the twilight zone brings back new species, new behaviors, new questions. We are only beginning to map this hidden world. Below the twilight zone, the last traces of sunlight vanish entirely. We have entered the midnight zone, the bath-apelagic realm, where no light from the surface has ever penetrated. Here, more than 1,000 meters down, the darkness is absolute. There is no day or night, no seasons, no variation in light whatsoever. The only illumination comes from the creatures themselves, flashes and glows of bioluminescence that punctuate the blackness like stars in a void. This is one of the largest habitats on Earth, and one of the least known. The midnight zone begins where no sunlight can reach, below about 1,000 meters, and extends down to the abyssal plains at 4,000 meters or more. Throughout this vast vertical range, conditions are remarkably constant. The temperature hovers just a few degrees above freezing. The pressure is immense but stable. The water is still and quiet, undisturbed by waves or weather. For creatures adapted to these conditions, the Midnight Zone is a place of stability, a refuge from the variability that characterizes shallower waters. Pressure in the deep ocean is difficult to comprehend. At 4,000 meters, the pressure is roughly 400 times greater than at the surface. Every square inch of a creature's body bears a weight equivalent to several automobiles, and yet life thrives here. The creatures of the Midnight Zone have evolved bodies that function under pressure that would instantly kill any surface organism. Their proteins fold differently. Their cell membranes are composed of different fats. They are engineered at the molecular level for a world we cannot inhabit. Food is scarce in the Midnight Zone. Without sunlight, there is no photosynthesis, and without photosynthesis, there's no primary production. The creatures that live here depend on food that falls from above, a slow rain of dead organisms, fecal pellets, and organic debris called marine snow. This gentle drift of detritus is the Midnight Zone's only consistent food source. Creatures wait in the darkness for particles to sink within reach, or they hunt one another, recycling the same limited pool of nutrients over and over. Life here is a study in scarcity and patience. Gigantism is surprisingly common in the deep ocean. Many deep-sea creatures grow larger than their shallow water relatives. Giant isopods, distant cousins of the pillbugs in your garden, can reach over a foot in length. Giant squid grow to more than 40 feet. Deep-sea fish often have larger bodies and larger mouths than similar species in shallower water. The reasons for this gigantism are not fully understood. It may relate to the scarcity of food, the cold temperatures that slow metabolism, or the lack of predators. Whatever the cause, the deep ocean is a land of giants, hidden in the darkness. The abyssal plains are the flattest places on Earth. These vast expanses of seafloor, covered in fine sediment, stretch for thousands of miles across the deep ocean basins. They are so flat because the sediment that falls from above settles evenly, smoothing out any irregularities in the underlying rock. The abyssal plains are also among the quietest places on Earth. Far from the noise of waves and wind, insulated by miles of water from the disturbances of the surface. In these silent, level expanses, life persists in forms we are still discovering. Deep-sea fish often have bioluminescent lures to attract prey in the darkness. The anglerfish is perhaps the most famous example, dangling a glowing appendage in front of its enormous mouth to draw in curious or hungry victims. But many other deep-sea fish use similar strategies. Some have lights along their bodies to camouflage their silhouettes from predators below. Others use lights to communicate with potential mates. Still others use lights to startle or confuse attackers. In a world without sunlight, the ability to make light is a powerful adaptation, and it has evolved independently in countless deep-sea lineages. The giant squid was the stuff of legend for centuries, a sea monster glimpsed only in fragments washed ashore or pulled from the stomachs of sperm whales. It was not until 2004 that a giant squid was photographed alive in its natural habitat, a solitary hunter drifting through the darkness of the deep Pacific. The images revealed a creature of alien beauty. its enormous eyes gleaming in the submersible's lights, its tentacles trailing behind like ribbons. Even now, we know remarkably little about how giant squid live. They remain among the most mysterious large animals on Earth. Deep-sea creatures age slowly and live long lives. In the cold, food-scarce environment of the midnight zone, metabolism runs at a fraction of the rate it does at the surface. Creatures grow slowly, reproduce rarely, and can live for decades or centuries. Some deep-sea corals have been dated to over 4,000 years old. Some fish may live for more than 100 years. This slow pace of life makes deep-sea ecosystems extraordinarily vulnerable to disturbance. Populations that are depleted cannot recover quickly. A single trawl through an abyssal plain can destroy communities that took centuries to develop. When a whale dies and its carcass sinks to the seafloor, it creates an ecosystem that can last for decades. These whale falls, as they are called, bring a sudden bounty of food to the food-starved abyss. First, scavengers arrive, hagfish and sleeper sharks and other creatures that tear flesh from the bones. Then come the opportunists, worms and crustaceans that colonize the remains. Finally, bacteria move in, breaking down the oils in the whale's bones and supporting communities of specialized organisms that can persist for 50 years or more. A single whale fall is an island of abundance in a desert of scarcity. The deep ocean floor is littered with manganese nodules, potato-sized lumps of metal that took millions of years to form. These nodules grow by accumulating metals from seawater at a rate of millimeters per million years. They are rich in manganese, nickel, cobalt, and other valuable elements, and they have attracted interest from mining companies. But mining these nodules would disturb the seafloor and destroy communities that took eons to develop. The slow pace of the deep means that any damage we do will persist for timescales beyond human reckoning. Dumbo octopuses, named for the ear-like fins that protrude from their heads, are among the deepest living octopuses known. They have been found at depths exceeding 4,000 meters, drifting through the darkness, flapping their fins to propel themselves gently through the water. Unlike their shallow water relatives, Dumbo octopuses can't change color quickly or jet away from predators. They are soft and slow, adapted to a world where speed matters less than patience. They feed on small crustaceans and worms, hovering above the seafloor and descending to engulf their prey. Less than 20% of the ocean floor has been mapped in detail. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than of the bottom of our own oceans. The deep sea remains one of the last true frontiers on Earth, a place where discoveries await and mysteries persist. Every expedition to the deep returns with new species, new observations, new questions. The midnight zone and the abyssal plains are not empty. They are full of life we have barely begun to catalog, stories we have barely begun to tell, and so we have traveled from the tide pools at the edge of the sea to the abyssal plains at its bottom, from the kelp forests that sway in the shallows to the coral reefs that glow with color and life, from the twilight zone, where creatures migrate by the billions, to the midnight zone, where light itself is made by living things. The ocean is not one hidden world, but many, stacked atop one another like the layers of a cake, each with its own communities, its own rules, its own mysteries. We have seen creatures that endure extremes we could not survive for a moment, that navigate by senses we do not possess, that build structures on timescales we can barely imagine. We have seen life finding a way in conditions that seem impossible, in crushing pressure and total darkness, in scorching shallows and freezing depths. The ocean is the largest hidden world of all, and it has been hiding in plain sight, covering most of our planet, shaping our climate, feeding our air, asking nothing, and giving everything. Rest now if you are ready. Let the image of a kelp forest swaying in the current become a gentle rhythm in your thoughts. Let the slow drift of marine snow falling through the darkness carry your mind towards sleep. There is one more descent ahead to the strangest ecosystems of all, where life runs on chemistry rather than sunlight, and the rules we thought we understood no longer apply. But for now, the ocean is enough. The hidden worlds beneath the waves will wait for you, patient and ancient and full of wonders whenever you are ready to return.